According to a new poll from the Washington Post and ABC News, Donald Trump's approval rating has never been higher. It's broken a record high. Whenever I do these stories, I try to look at the aggregate to see what other polls are saying because there's accusations of bias. And I think putting all the polls together is a good way to actually suss out where Trump is actually at. Now, it's difficult because in the aggregate, not all polls are from the same time. But there's been a lot of stories about the booming economy, about the incumbent advantage, and now Trump's approval rating, as well as his favorability, being up. It sounds like Trump is on track for a 2020 victory, yet for some reason, even with this news, we see this from Jake Tapper. Biden would get 53% to Trump's 43. Harris would get 48 to his 46. Warren would tie. Sanders would win. Buttigieg would tie. The point is, even with all of this incredible news with the economy, Trump's approval rating, they're actually saying it's going to be a toss-up and that Biden would beat Trump. The reason I don't really buy into that is because before Trump got elected, people weren't too sure about what his performance was going to be. He still beat Hillary Clinton. Why would Joe Biden beat Donald Trump when the economy is booming, when unemployment is at record lows, when paycheck growth is on a massive upward trend? More jobs, the economy is great. With the incumbent advantage, as well as Trump's favorability, his approval rating, you'd think he'd be on track to win. For some reason, the polls are saying maybe not. So you know what? Here's what I can say. The polls were wrong. Wrong. The whole system is screwed up. We have no idea what's going to happen. So to try and better understand what's happening, I got a bunch of stories, but let's figure out what's going on with Trump's approval rating, why it may be high. I think we know, but we'll look at some other polls too to see exactly what's going on. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a monthly PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address. But of course, the best thing you can do is just share this video because YouTube doesn't suggest my videos the same way they used to anymore for whatever reason. So I rely on you. But let's read the news. The Hill reports Trump's approval rating hits highest point of presidency. The survey, which was released Sunday, found that 47% of registered voters approve of the job Trump is doing in the White House, a figure that represents a 5-point increase from April. 50% of registered voters disapprove of Trump's performance as president, however. Meanwhile, 44% of voting age Americans said they approve of Trump's job performance, while 53% said they disapprove of it. Just 39% of voting age Americans said they approved of Trump's job performance in April. So even among people who aren't necessarily registered voters, his approval rating is up 5 points across the board. Again, if he was able to win in 2016 without proving himself, I can only imagine he's on track to win again. But don't take my word for it. I've got some better sources than the pundits. You can't trust the polls, but I'll tell you who you can trust: Vegas and Wall Street, because people certainly don't like losing money. But we'll get to that. Let's read on. They say, the economy served as the only issue where a majority said they approve of Trump's performance, according to the poll. 51% of respondents said they approved of the way he has handled economic issues since entering the White House. 42% said they disapprove of his handling of the economy. Meanwhile, a majority of respondents said they disapprove of how Trump has handled immigration, healthcare, issues of special concern to women, abortion, climate change, gun violence, and foreign policy. 49% said they disapprove of the way he's handled taxes, while 42% said they approve. They go on to say, in addition, 65% of respondents said Trump has acted in an unpresidential way since taking office. 28% said he has acted in a fitting and proper way. Let me tell you what I think. It's interesting to see that so many people would approve of his job and view him favorably, yet say he's acting unpresidential. But that actually kind of makes sense. I absolutely will commend the president on how well the economy is. Hey man, I'm not an economist. I don't know exactly what's happening or why in terms of fine-tuning the economy, but everything seems to be going really, really great. In fact, to my detriment. I've told you guys before, I was trying to hire a contractor a few months ago, couldn't find anybody. They were all booked up. When I was trying to build my van, everybody's booked up like a year in advance. So it's just, the economy is doing great. Whatever Trump did, it worked. Look, I'm not going to get into the minutiae here because I'm just not an economist. You're going to get a ton of people on the left arguing, but you know what? Here we are. The economy is great. But I can still say that President Trump has acted unpresidential. Is that exactly what they said? Unpresidential. Here's the thing, and I've said this before. Barack Obama had some charisma. He knew how to talk to the press, and he knew how to rope people into just trusting what he was doing was right, even when he was doing horrific things like drone strikes in countries we aren't at war with, namely Yemen, creating the disposition matrix, also known as the kill list. Obama did a bunch of really fascistic things. Yes, I'm using that word on purpose. I'm using it somewhat facetiously to make a point. Oh, did I say Trump? Obama did a bunch of these things, okay? Obama did a bunch of really awful things. Did people complain about it back then? No, because he was, quote, presidential. So what does that mean to me? I gotta admit, not a whole lot. I don't care if Trump is acting presidential for the most part, so long as everything's working and people are happy. But I can criticize him, and I have criticized him, for being unpresidential. It's different. Are things working? Did he pull back from Iran? Did he just make great strides, made history in North Korea? Those are all great things. Okay, there you go. But I still think in many ways he's been unpresidential. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what my opinion is on his behavior. It matters if things are getting done and if people are going to support him moving forward. So here's what I want to do first. I got a bunch of things that, people are questioning whether Trump can win. They're questioning whether the economy is really going well. But let's do this. First, Trump's job approval. We have the aggregates here, and the latest polls from ABC News and the Washington Post show his highest ever. However, in nearly the same time frame, The Economist and YouGov has Trump around 44 as opposed to 47. Rasmussen tends to have him in a favorable position in the same time frame, showing 49. Reuters Ipsos for the same time frame, 43. And Politico, similarly, 43. The other polls following this, CNN, they're not necessarily for the same time frame, so I think these are more credible. His overall approval rating is actually still really high, according to the aggregate. Take a look here. In the past 2 years, Trump's approval rating today is only about 0.1 lower than its previous high point in May 10th. And for the past 2 years, it's never been higher. The only time it would seem that his approval rating has been higher was right when he took office, with around a 46.1. Is that what we got? It's hard to get the fine details, but around 46. So where he's at today in the aggregate is still some of the highest approval ratings he's ever seen. Now, let's take a look at favorability, because favorability is different. It's not so much about his job, but whether or not people like him. And even still, his favorability is higher now than it's been in the past 2 years, only being higher right around the time he was elected. So this is all great news for Trump, which brings me in to the next question I have. What I highlighted in the beginning, if Trump's favorability and approval rating are higher than they've been in 2 years, then why is it that they believe Trump is on track to lose to Biden, or that it's a toss-up between the other lesser-known politicians like Buttigieg? I get it. They're popular a bit, but this is what they're saying. So hypothetical matchups among registered voters in the same poll. So this is the point. That poll I showed you from the Washington Post ABC News poll, showing his approval rating as high as it has been in 2 years, or to them, high as they've ever seen it, still says that Biden would beat him. To me, I can't really understand that. So, look, I'll say this on this point. The polls were wrong in 2016. A lot of the polls were wrong in the midterms. That was I predicted the Republicans would sweep. I was wrong. They did really well, but then all of a sudden there was this weird tide where Democrats started popping up and winning. And hey, I was wrong. So you know what I'm going to say at this point? We have no idea what to expect. The polls are all over the place. Who knows? Who knows? But I'll tell you who I would defer to, not the polls, Wall Street, and Vegas. But again, we'll get to that. The first thing I want to do is challenge some of the more popular politicians' claims against Donald Trump. We can see here that those with the best chance of winning, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. So I'm curious, what is their attack vector in the 2020 debates? Well, first, we have this story, which is kind of nonsensical from Real Clear Politics. No, the story from RCP is fine. It's what Biden said. Here's a quote from Biden. Russian election interference would not have happened on my watch and Barack's watch. I'm so confused by this. This is what Biden's trying to use up against Trump, that Russian interference wouldn't have happened on his or Barack's watch, but it literally did. So I have to wonder what he thinks he's going to win by saying this, but perhaps there are a lot of people who are uninitiated, don't pay attention to politics, and are going, yes, Joe Biden would be strong on Russia, not realizing Biden and Obama let it happen. They were the ones they were on watch. They say former Vice President, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden sits down with CNN's Chris Cuomo to discuss his position and what he'd look for in a running mate if he were to secure his party's nomination. He goes on to speak about, Russia. So that's that. Look, there's a lot of other things that we can talk about Biden, but I think this is one of the more recent stories that I found interesting. But Bernie Sanders has, in my opinion, the more egregious offense in his campaigning. What we have heard from the Democrats in the debates, from Bernie Sanders, is that the economy is great, but only for the wealthiest Americans. That's actually fake news. But of course, what do they really have to go up against Trump with? Now listen, I was a big fan of Bernie Sanders in 2016. I am not so much a fan of his anymore, and I am continually less a fan of his as time goes on over statements like this. I can be critical of some of the things that Gabbard and Yang have said, but for the most part, they come off as very, very principled, charismatic, with good ideas that I think are important. Tulsi being anti-war, Yang being forward-thinking on domestic policy like nuclear power, the VAT tax on major corporations. I think there's great conversations to be had. I don't think they'll win. I think Trump will win, but I do like them. Bernie, however, has continually lost me because it seems like Bernie just keeps lying. First, Bernie said not that long ago he was not in favor of open borders because the world has too many poor people who would want to come here. Yet, on the debate stage, he said that he would provide undocumented immigrants with health care. I don't want to put it specifically on him, but we had all the Democrats basically saying that we shouldn't be prioritizing deportation of illegal immigrants and we should provide a path to citizenship. This is all effectively open borders, saying, come here, we'll give you government benefits, we won't deport you, and you can become a citizen. It's just a very weak open borders. Like, if it was direct open borders, they just be like, you can come do whatever you want. So it's not perfectly, but it's essentially, right? Well, here's what he said. Senator Sanders speaks in Houston. This is from yesterday night. President Trump tells us that the economy is booming. And in one sense, he is right. It is booming in an incredible way for the wealthiest people in this country. Fake news. And I've got a couple sources here to prove it. First, unemployment is at record lows. Here's how it's calculated. The story from CNBC says, the unemployment rate is at a record low, like a 50-year low, like a 50-year 3.6% low. The figure calculated by the U.S. Census Bureau and released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics at the beginning of every month is commonly used to gauge the health of the U.S. economy. If it's low, investors and consumers tend to grow more confident, leaving people more willing to spend money. Conversely, people tend to guard their cash if it starts to rise. Some people think the government tracks every employed and unemployed worker in the country to calculate the unemployment rate. That's wrong. Others think it's based on the number of people receiving unemployment insurance. Also incorrect. It's a much more complicated process that involves finding the answers the old-fashioned way, knocking on doors and making phone calls. Save yourself the guessing and check out our video, yada yada. I'm not going to play the video. The point is, by the standard metric in which we calculate unemployment, it is down across the board. That means people who weren't working before are working today. It's not perfect. There are some arguments to be made, such as sometimes people who just give up on trying to find a job are considered, they're not considered in the employment rate. But I think this is best we can do. Whatever your argument is, unemployment is way down. Record lows. 50-year record low. Bernie, how is that catering to the top wealthiest in this country? How does that cater to the 1%? These are people who were previously not working, now able to work, contribute to the economy, make a living, and survive. But many people then say, oh, sure, they're working. Ocasio-Cortez made the silly claim that they're working 2 jobs. I believe this was parroted by Kamala Harris. I'm not sure. No, that is not how it works. Working 2 jobs is not how they calculate unemployment. You're wrong. So many people would argue that unemployment is down fine, but wages are stagnant, right? Not necessarily. Now, there is an argument for sure because people are going to push back on each other, but I got to say, looking at the facts, it does seem like wages are going up. Now, sure, the wealthiest may be benefiting the most, but it doesn't mean things are bad. Things are good. We can't ignore it. So let's pull this up. From June 28th, are wages rising or flat? They say to hear politicians tell it, wages are rising at the fastest rate in a decade, are the same as they were 45 years ago, and are at a 60-year low. And all 3 claims could be correct depending on what measure is used to justify it. Parsing the political claims on wages is an exercise in fun with stats. There are several different ways to measure what's happening to workers' paychecks, leading to disparate and conflicting claims and confusing messages to voters. There's not necessarily one way to look at wages, and that's why you can get all the conflicting claims. So let's do this. Let's take a look right here. Since 95, wages have been steadily increasing, and they're much higher today than they were in the past. Now, in the 70s, things were really, really great. So these are total private seasonal adjusted inflation adjusted. Average weekly earnings of production and non-supervisory employees. On the surface, it looks like wages are going up. Regardless of whether or not we want to argue if the wages are going up faster for one group or the other, it doesn't mean poor people are hurting. And therein lies the true argument. By all means, look at the stats and argue that they're not good enough or they're good. Let's see what their conclusion is in the long run, and then I'll make the point. They say about that 60-year low. Cory Booker, meanwhile, has made a very different claim about wages. The New Jersey Democrat who is running for president said in an interview with PBS on April 29, and a lot of that is because we're at a time of corporate profits at an 85-year high, wages at about a 60-year low. Booker's campaign didn't respond to our request for support for this claim, but the senator is likely referring to wages as a percentage of gross domestic income, and he's close. Wage and salary disbursements were 43% of GDI in 2017, while the percentage was lower from 2010 to 2016. Let's not get into the nitty-gritty. They say, sham boss of the measure is saying that workers are getting a smaller share of the economic pie than they used to. Chris Tilley, a professor of urban planning at the University of California, Los Angeles, also told us there isn't anything wrong with looking at wages and salaries this way, but it answers a different question. It tells us what workers are getting relative to other kinds of income recipients in the economy. Boom, and there it is, the point I wanted to make. We can see that adjusted income is up. Bernie is technically right. It is helping the wealthiest in this country. They may be getting a bigger share of the pie, but that doesn't mean poor people are being hurt. So you can argue that wealth disparity is a problem. I certainly think so, and I'd like to see a bigger share of that pie go to poor people. But all that really matters, when it comes to the vote, how do people feel? They're probably going to feel good. The economy is great, they got a job, and their wages are increasing. Very few people, I imagine, are going to look at the boss and wonder how much he's making and be angry about it, though some people would. But you know what? Forget my opinion on what any of this means, because I think it's fair to point out it's a huge argument, and you'll need to go through all of the details to try and figure out whether or not people are actually going to make more money. The bigger question is not whether or not Bernie is right or wrong. It's whether or not Trump will win. And I'll tell you this. Wall Street expects a Trump win in 2020. But a new poll points to a different outcome. Sure, we've seen the polls. It's like I highlighted. They say Biden is going to win. But Wall Street is betting on Trump. You know who else is betting on Trump? Las Vegas odds. Wall Street believe Trump will win election in 2020. I'll tell you this. The polls can be misleading for one reason. People like to vote for who they think will win. And that means if the polls say Biden will win, they're hoping people will vote Biden. So I don't really trust the polls. But more importantly, the polls were wrong in 2016. Now, it's true, Vegas was wrong in 2016 as well. But I'll say this. If I had to make a bet, I'm going to bet on what Vegas thinks. People hate to lose money. If economic forecasts are saying Trump will win, if Wall Street is putting their money on Trump, and Vegas is putting their money on Trump, I'm not going to trust the political pollsters who ask leading questions to try and deliver an outcome. I'm going to look at the people who are like, hey man, I don't want to lose money. Here's what I think is going to happen. Because money is more important. Money talks, BS walks. This is a story from last month, just a few weeks ago. They say in Vegas, odd makers rate high on Trump as a potential winner and are betting on his next term. Wall Street also does. They do go on to say that poll data is casting doubts, but that's not the point. The point is, we know the polls. What does Vegas think? So, for the most part, they say odds favoring Trump. On Trump re-election odds, a new feed says Trump re-election prospects are promising. Trump's odd to win the election was plus 175 in April, or a couple of months ago. In June, Trump has reduced to plus 100 odds. The latest release from Bet Online shows Joe Biden is the closest competition with plus 425. I don't exactly know how that breaks down, but I have been tracking the Vegas odds, and I've been tracking other betting, and it looks like Trump is on track. So, the main point we can wrap up on this video. The polls show that Donald Trump's approval rating is higher than it's ever been in the past 2 years, and higher than it's ever been for this poll. And the average, the RCP average, is higher than it's been in 2 years. The economy is at record low, like the unemployment is at record lows, the economy record highs. Unemployment across the board for all different demographics is fantastic. Wage growth appears to be up. All good news. But for some reason, they say Biden will beat Trump. I'm not buying it, especially when Vegas and Wall Street comes out. So I'll say this. Seems like Trump is on track for a 2020 victory. Seems like it. I don't want to make any hard predictions. Who knows what will happen? There's a lot that can change in the meantime. So all we can really do is stick with the news, stick around. More updates on this stuff when it comes out. Follow me on Minds at minds.com/Timcast. I'll have more segments coming up at youtube.com/TimcastNews. And as developments occur, you can follow this channel. So subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you all in the next segment. Again, youtube.com/TimcastNews.